The old house groaned as it settled each night. Floorboards creaked, pipes clanged, but there was another sound that always caught my attention: the soft, shuffling steps in the hallway just outside my bedroom door. Every night the sound began, a slow, hesitant shuffle, like someone unsure of their footing in the dark. It always started after my parents had gone to bed, after the house had fallen silent except for the usual nocturnal symphony. I never thought much of it. Our old house was full of strange noises and drafts that whistled through the eaves. The shuffling, I assumed, was just my parents, making their way to the kitchen for a late-night snack or a glass of water. It was a comforting thought, actually, a reminder that even in the depths of the night, I wasn't alone. The familiar sound lulled me into a sense of security, a backdrop to my dreams. The steps never ventured beyond my door. They would shuffle back and forth for a while, then fade into silence. I imagined my mother, perhaps, pacing the hallway as she worried over bills or my father's latest project. Sometimes I would picture my father, unable to sleep, tiptoeing to the living room to reread a favorite book. The image brought a smile to my face. It was comforting to know they were nearby. One night, however, the familiar rhythm was broken. The shuffling steps, instead of fading as usual, grew louder, closer. My heart pounded in my chest. This was new. I held my breath, listening intently. The steps stopped right outside my door. Silence. I could almost feel a presence on the other side of the thin wooden barrier. Fear, cold and sharp, pricked at the edges of my mind. The silence stretched on, each tick of the clock on my bedside table amplifying the tension. I strained to hear any sound, any indication of what was happening just beyond my door. Then a soft, almost imperceptible scratching sound. It was coming from the door itself, as if someone were hesitantly reaching out, their fingers trailing across the wood. I squeezed my eyes shut, pulling the blankets up to my chin. My imagination ran wild, conjuring images of shadowy figures and unseen eyes peering through the darkness. The scratching stopped. My breath caught in my throat. I lay there, frozen in fear, waiting for what felt like an eternity. Just when I thought the terrifying silence would never end, I heard it. My name, whispered softly on the other side of the door. The voice was barely audible, a hushed breath that sent shivers down my spine. Panic seized me. My blood ran cold. Who was out there, whispering my name in the dead of night? Why didn't they just knock if they needed something? The whispered name hung in the air, heavy and ominous. I didn't dare move, didn't dare breathe. Fear had me in its icy grip, paralyzing me. I lay there for what felt like hours, my mind racing, my body trembling. The whispered name echoed in the silence, a chilling reminder that I was not alone. The rest of the night was a blur of terror and anticipation. Sleep was impossible. Every creak of the house, every rustle of leaves outside my window sent my heart racing. I lay awake, listening intently for any sound from the hallway. But the shuffling steps and the whispered name were gone, replaced by an unnerving silence that was somehow more terrifying. Dawn finally broke, casting a pale light through the gaps in my curtains. Relief washed over me, chasing away the shadows of the night. The terror of the darkness seemed to fade with the approaching day. But the memory of that whispered name lingered, a cold knot of fear in the pit of my stomach. Who had been outside my door, and what did they want? As soon as I heard my parents moving about downstairs, I threw off the covers and raced to their room. I needed answers. I needed to know I wasn't going crazy. My parents, still groggy from sleep, listened patiently as I recounted the events of the night. I told them about the shuffling steps, the scratching at my door, the whispered name that had chilled me to the bone. To my surprise, they didn't dismiss my fears. They didn't tell me it was just a bad dream. Instead, a look of concern passed between them, a silent exchange that spoke volumes. "Are you sure you didn't imagine it, sweetheart?" my mother asked gently, her brow furrowed with worry. "You know how these old houses can be, full of strange noises." We sat down for breakfast, but the food felt like lead in my stomach. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. My parents' unusual silence only amplified my unease. "Did you hear anything last night?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Any strange noises in the hallway?" My father, usually a jovial and talkative man, simply shook his head. He seemed preoccupied, lost in thought. My mother, too, was unusually quiet, her gaze distant. The silence stretched between us, heavy and oppressive. It was as if a dark cloud had settled over our usually cheerful breakfast table. After breakfast, I decided to investigate. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to the events of the previous night. I needed to find an explanation, a logical reason for the shuffling steps and the whispered name. I searched the hallway, examining every inch of the floor for any signs of movement, any footprints or scuff marks that might indicate someone had been there. But there was nothing. I checked the other bedrooms, the bathroom, even the attic and the basement. The house was eerily quiet, as if holding its breath. But I found no evidence of an intruder, no explanation for the sounds I had heard. Frustration gnawed at me. I felt like I was going crazy. Had I imagined the whole thing? Was it just a figment of my overactive imagination? I returned to my room, defeated and more confused than ever. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the closed door, trying to make sense of it all. The scratching sound, I realized, had come from the area around the doorknob. I examined it closely, but there were no marks, no scratches, nothing out of the ordinary. I ran my fingers over the smooth surface of the doorknob, my mind racing. Who would have been trying to open my door in the middle of the night, and why? The whispered name echoed in my memory, sending shivers down my spine. It had been so real, so close, I couldn't have imagined it. Could I? Days turned into nights, and still the mystery remained unsolved. The shuffling steps and the whispered name became a haunting memory, a constant source of anxiety. I tried to put it out of my mind, to convince myself it had been a bad dream, but deep down, I knew better. Something wasn't right. My parents, despite their initial concern, seemed to have dismissed the incident. They assured me it was nothing to worry about, that old houses were full of strange noises. But their reassurances rang hollow. I couldn't shake the feeling that they were hiding something, that they knew more than they were letting on. One evening, as I was searching through the attic for an old photo album, I stumbled upon a dusty leather-bound journal tucked away in a forgotten corner. Curious, I blew off the dust and opened it. The journal belonged to my grandmother, who had lived in this very house many years ago. As I flipped through the brittle pages, my eyes fell upon an entry that made my blood run cold. In her elegant script, my grandmother described hearing strange noises in the night, shuffling steps outside her bedroom door, and a voice whispering her name. She too had been terrified, convinced that something sinister was afoot. But what chilled me to the bone was her final entry, written in a shaky hand. "I know now who whispers my name in the night. It is the house itself, and it has a story to tell." The journal slipped from my grasp, falling to the attic floor with a soft thud. I stared at it, my heart pounding in my chest. The house itself? What did it mean, and what story did it have to tell? As I stood there in the dusty attic, a cold realization washed over me. I was not alone in this house. Something else was here, something ancient and unseen.